Y'all hear me? That microphone right now too. Oof, sorry about that, Charles. You should. Can you guys
upload files
over in this section?
Okay.
Test file. You just So if you're not actively speaking, please make sure you mute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. I might mute my mic.
One of the things y'all were working on from last week was just kind of a baseline surface level analysis. So if you have your file, your Excel spreadsheet, whatever you end up doing it in, go ahead and upload it, and I'll pull it up so that we can all look at it together. Looking for a job. Here's an awesome one.
Not yet. Black right now. Or it is from, oh, there it is.
We're looking at in Nevada, prostitution is legal. However, the prostitute must be registered and follow rules and regulations and laws which state that he or she must be HIV. Link provides statement as fact with citation. Nevada that help in HIV. Basically, we have statement as fact with citation. Since good start, you probably want to do, because each of these is going to have multiple bits that you're going to be coding. So you've got statement of fact with citation, but you might want to get narrower and have a code for the fact. So prostitution is legal. That would be a code. HIV/AIDS testing would be another code, because you're really at this stage of the game just trying to describe exactly what's happening or what they're saying in the statement. What is the most important pieces that they're saying? This provides statement as fact with citation isn't particularly descriptive, and so you want your codes to be more descriptive of what is actually happening in here. So prostitution, legality. You're really just trying to describe almost exactly what's in there. So these are all major things that they're talking about in this statement. Now keep in mind that when you go to the next level where you're categorizing these, some of these will wind up getting collapsed into the categories. So the licensure and legality issues might wind up in same category of legal issues or the legality of prostitution. HIV/AIDS testing may wind up in another component, or it may even wind up in the same part with the legality, because it's part of maintaining your legal license is to be HIV/AIDS
And
testing.
would that be setting up norms?
It definitely would be part of setting up norms, because rules and regulations emerge out of norms. So that would be something else that you could identify if you were going towards LTCA or other forms of cultural analysis. So Nevada has legal prostitution, which implies that the norms of the state or the members of the state society there believes that it's acceptable. Then the question on the next one, statement of problem or topic, that one also looks like they're somewhat asking a hypothetical question, because they're hypothesizing to some extent that if prostitution were legal in all states, it would help in HIV/AIDS prevention. Talking about
So is
that would just
number line 4, is that a different person? Is that a response?
question for the people that And a unique ID number in the first column. Awesome. 1, 2. Statement as fact without citation. Second person responding. Again, in this instance, you could even go in and say that state that it directly addresses the previous statement. In this instance, this begins a pretty serious constitutive communicative act because they're effectively rejecting the claim of the first person. This very statement, prostitution is not legal. Here, counterclaims are made that it goes by fighting, not necessarily. They're not providing citations, but they seem to be evidence.
Yeah, that's what.
They also provide additional information beyond the initial claim. Then they provide an opinion. This is also a reject possible claim to truth that is made in line 3 that prostitution were legal in states across America, like it is in Nevada. It could conceivably, so that is the proposition that they're making. That is the hypothesis, is that it could make it better. So again, the claim is rejected, and they discuss specific legality. So you're going to have multiples. You can see as I'm going through this that I'm adding several additional ones, and some of them are
I'm only seeing the whiteboard. It's it goes. There it is.
You really think the meth head $10 a hand job hooker is going to spend the time? Asks hypothetical question, but it's also a statement of a problem, I would say. They're addressing a particular problem, original claim. So in the statement of problem topic, that might need to be a lot more narrow, because the way I read it, I might have to create a whole separate code because they're talking about a statement of problem within the claim versus statement of the problem within the overall topic. So if we went back to this first one, the statement of problem, second response of statement of problem topic in line 6. Now, in this instance, it's implied that they're providing an opinion, and so that would be at a higher level of inference that you'd be making that, because by making the statement at all in the way that they have, they're providing their specific opinion that it will not work. Let's see if I can make that. So what you might do is, rather than using X's or something, you could use, and I've done this in other instances, you could use an E for explicits or an I for implicit, so that you have an idea that they're very specifically stating this. And the reason for identifying explicit versus implicit is because if you are seeing something that's implicit, you're going to have to do more work to support your claim that it exists. You have to explain why, or you may have to explain why it's implicitly stated that you think the meth head $10 handjob hooker is going to spend it. Just the way that they phrased that question, it's meant to be rhetorical, and therefore it's implicit that they're rejecting the claim. They are responding to the question directly there. They're also talking about HIV and AIDS testing. They're talking about license.
Probably be high inference to say that this person is making a judgment.
They are definitely making a judgment. So
you could the language itself is.
So We get to absolutely not. They will continue to spread their dirty diseases around on the streets behind the alleyways. That's pretty explicit
Yeah.
opinion. Very explicit rejection to the initial claim. Makes a new counterclaim. About HIV and AIDS.
Mhm.
Now, another thing that you can code for in here is definitely there's that judgment made, but you can have an additional kind of affective response. So kind of negative, because this is definitely a very negative response. This person. Part of the reason to do that is so that if there are multiple negative responses, you can see where those major rejections of claims come in and those very visceral responses are made. Part of the reason you want to do that is because you want to see those instances where people are just rejecting out of hand based on emotion versus those that are providing real evidence to support. Because participant 2 here has some interesting statements in line 4 that sound really strong, and I don't know where they got them from, so that kind of undermines some of their claims, but they also make it very emotionally. Then we get to 3. I don't think legalizing prostitution would help the fight against HIV or AIDS simply because there's no evidence to support that hypothesis. Show me some of the evidence and I might change my mind. Implicit. Execution. Talking about HIV, well, not necessarily talking about it's judgments made. But they also say that they're open to possibility of changing their mind, which other code that you might use, which would be not all of them are going to be open to that, so that makes this particular another thing that you might say in this instance that's more implicit is that this person is very scientific method based, very science based in terms of their thoughts and opinions. That would be maybe possibly in contrast to the affect student. So you can kind of see that number 3 here only really utters 2 sentences, but they actually reveal a lot about themselves, the way that they, what it is that they're looking for. Some of this, yes, it's implicit, it's implied, it's things that you have to interpret, but that's part of the analysis that you conduct. Prostitution would most likely spark more cases of HIV. Providing an opinion, but this might border between providing statement as fact without citation. Provides response to question. So that might be one that gets eliminated later. Counterclaim is made that it would increase addressing HIV and AIDS reduction. Not open to change, not really worried. Doesn't matter, these people put all this stuff up publicly anyway. The only time you really have to worry about it is the publications perspective. Again, provides opinion. This instance, claim. You can even put in things like and the reason to put in something like minimally responsive is because some of these are just going to be useless in terms of their responses. So you want to be aware of that because you may want to eliminate them from the many follow-ups that you do because their stuff is just not particularly useful. This is another this is the job. Counterclaim talks about regulation enforcement, but it's 5 there. Responds 1. Jake, but will the $10 handjob hooker go away if you keep prostitution illegal? So also, to some extent, it's an implied hypothetical question, is if you do this, will it go away? And in this instance, you could say that they're rejecting Jake's claim about prostitution. So you want to be as explicit as you can maybe about what claim is being rejected. So you can use the spreadsheet to put in additional details, because one of the things about analysis is you do it for a really long period of time, and then you come back to it to try and do your write-up of your report, and you can't remember why you coded something that way because you did it 2 months earlier. So the more information you can fit into your spreadsheet, the happier you're going to be when it comes time to do the writing. There is also an implied counterclaim here that it's not going to reduce the dollar hookers. And the reason to do this between the explicit and the implicit is, to some extent, the more important part in the long run is going to be the implicit claim. Most people, especially in forums, when they're trying to not necessarily be jerks about stuff, will try and imply rather than outright state, because they don't want to create some sort of Next one asks for opinions. Can't see what the post is, so I don't know if that article is responsive to the question or not. What do you guys, have you looked at it, Charles or Heather? No problem, Charles. The next one, definitely, they're getting pros and cons of prostitution, so they're not just asking for evidence, they're providing additional context. Explicitly asking for opinions, but provides additional evidence and discussion topics. hard to say that those are minimally responsive because they're long, but they're definitely responsive to the Constitution. Would be better off decriminalized rather than legal. So it definitely provides explicit opinion, provides I think to some extent it is providing statement of fact with citation because they're specifically referring to the two links that were provided. Addressing legality. This is the first time that's talked about decriminalization. And then they add another wrinkle in line 15 about taxation. Problem.
Scott, do you ever note that, like for example, the point I think originally had to do with HIV and AIDS, and it's gone off to prostitution more than that? Is that anything, or that?
It is one of those things that you can talk about how it went in that direction. I don't have what the original.
Oh, okay.
If this was just the original statement and this is what they put out there, because I think what it does is this person put this up there to ask this question, a kind of a devil's advocate question.
Okay.
But it falls within some of the larger questions and some of the other links and stuff that I and others had posted, in which they discuss prostitution and its relationship to HIV and AIDS. So that would be, if it's totally off topic, then definitely you want to, suddenly they're going from HIV and AIDS into staplers, and that's kind of an issue.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I've seen stuff like that, but that gets to unresponsive to question would be one of those things that you would definitely have a code for. Minimally responsive, but you can have one that's just definitely one that you'll get quite often with some of these, is that just completely where somebody wants to get on a soapbox. The article is pretty weak in argumenting. In addition to providing an opinion, they are also engaging in something else that's really important, which they are engaging And you can just have one that's engaging in critique. You could have something more narrow, engaging in critique of evidence, engaging in critique of topic, however you want to do it. So in this instance, they're engaging in critique of the article, but that's a pretty big deal to get them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Impressed that we had any undergraduate.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh well, if she be subject to sexual jokes and whatnot in the workplace, them in the same type of legality consequences as why. So rejecting the claim and talking about and providing a response to the question pretty explicitly, and the question was implicit in the what do you think of this? To some extent, they're making a counterclaim.
Oh.
I'm okay. Can you get you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll do this. So there's definitely a judgment being made here. There's probably other things. I'm not. For me, the way I see it, a drug house gets broken into, they steal the drugs, I complain that the police don't want to take the attitudes. Yes, they're human beings, and obviously I feel effectively providing an opinion very explicitly. Medical question. implicit that they're asking for other people's opinions. Implicit that they're talking about the legality of prostitution, but they're doing it through metaphor, effectively. Don't use like or as. So we'll just say metaphor. Why we don't teach research classes early. Really? That's what I have to do for the rest of my career? I don't think so. Popcorn directly outside my...
As long as it's not burnt. Oh.
Hours. Rejects the initial claims. Makes a counterclaim that is pretty offensive, I would say. Regulation and enforcement of law. That would be one that you might come back to try and figure out how you're going to, how or if you want to frame that kind of very negative response in a different way. One thing that I'll often do is if something really strikes me and I want to come back to it, I'll just bold it. That's a thought, never thought of it on my own. Thanks for opening. Partial. There's a bit of a judgment being made that they don't necessarily. They're clearly open to change. To some extent, minimally responsive, right? Is rules for testing that's performed. In this instance, I would say, because there's so much here, you should definitely break this down considerably. So, that first line, I don't think legalizing prostitution would help out the spread of the disease. That would probably be a line by itself. Then they have rules and testing, but the problem is the customer, right? I mean, the customer does. I would probably stop about here with working girl. Because that's another kind of coherent base. Because otherwise, if you have this much, then it's going to be hard for you to identify which part went with which in terms of your coding. So you'll want to cut that down a little bit. The thing to always remember is you're doing this because you have to come back to it later, and you're not going to know what it was you meant 3 weeks earlier if you got too much data in a line. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we get back to decriminalization, and that customers will choose a clean hooker. One of the things that I do find interesting is that there have been stories, a lot of stories, in various news outlets, and have been entire television shows about prostitution in Nevada that address this, and none of them thought it was a good idea to go look at. That's just me. So, does this make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Every time I share my screen, this thing just goes to. Upload what I just did back up here so y'all can download it. It's the participant posts dash SJW. I always hated it when my professors would do something in class and then not give it to us, like they were trying to hide it from us or something. Okay. Does that all make sense? Feeling good about this, or at least sort of good about this, like you have some idea. Okay. So, are there other questions about, I know some of you weren't here last week, any questions about readings, any questions about do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right now all you're doing is grabbing several posts from a thread and doing coding. You can pick whichever one you want to do. gave you links to both the fall 2015 project and the spring 2015 project. So I would recommend, Ms. Reed, that you do not use any that you participated in, since you were one of the instructors, but maybe choose one someone else did. Yes, your codes should largely be based on critical theory, but at this level, you're still doing as much surface level as you can, and then you'll bring in the critical theory pieces as well. So you'll want to definitely address any instances where you see feminist pieces, queer pieces, socioeconomic references, power imbalances and references. That last one was rife with really awesome power imbalances and larger cultural problems and
Yep, I lost him.
I thought I was talking.
I saw the
Yeah,
microphone, but
apparently I had a disconnect. I didn't realize it actually completely disconnected. So yes, on to your question. Um, already did that. So yeah. So for next week, I would like y'all to come in with a pretty detailed set of coding like Heather and Charles did here, so that we're going to break into some small groups and work on those further and effectively critique one another's work the way that I did right here. So I was modeling for y'all, and I will come to each of the groups, continue to do that with you, and then following week I'm going to have you take a larger set that you want to work on for this, and you'll work on that individually, and we won't meet. Oh, sorry, I said the following week. Next week we're going to meet face to face, and we will go through and do critique of each other's coding, and then the following week you guys will work independently on a larger set of data that you're going to use for your primary outcomes for the course, that analysis, and you'll work individually in your small groups during that week. And then the following week we'll have kind of a check-in online meeting, and we'll be pretty close to done at that point.
Okay. Yeah, good luck.
Questions, thoughts, observations?
That's good.